Committee members, we have a quorum, and we have the timeline from the end of the last vote in the Commons. With that, I will call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 66 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills, Social Development, and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order June 23, 2022. There will be members appearing virtually in today's meeting. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to make a few comments. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. And for those appearing in the room or virtually, you have the option of choosing to participate in the official language of your choice by using the interpretation icon at the bottom of your surface. And in the room, the headset will provide translation service for you. If there's an interruption in translation service, please get my attention. We'll suspend while it's being corrected. As I said, unless there's exceptional circumstances, which we do not anticipate, to participate verbally in the meeting, you have to have a House of Commons approved headset. For those members of the committee appearing virtually, you can participate in all votes in the House by simply indicating yes or no by thumbs up or thumbs down. Bill C-35 is which we're reviewing, an act respecting early learning and childcare in Canada, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Friday, February the 3rd, 2023. The committee will continue its study of Bill C-35, an act respecting early learning and childcare in Canada. Today we're resuming clause by clause meeting. As the name indicates, this is an examination of the order of the bill. Now into our third committee hearing on the bill. The proceedings are the same. Amendments have been given an alphanumeric number to indicate which party submitted them. There's no need for a seconder to move an amendment. Once moved, you will need unanimous consent to withdraw it. During debate on amendment, members are permitted to move sub-amendments. These sub-amendments must be submitted in writing. They do not require the approval of the mover of the amendment. Only one sub-amendment may be considered at a time, and that sub-amendment cannot be amended. When a sub-amendment is moved, that's where we're at when we will resume, is moved to an amendment is voted on first, and another sub-amendment may be moved, or the committee may consider the main amendment as voted on. Once every clause has been due, then we will adopt the title. We'll adopt the title of the bill, and the order to reprint the bill may be required. Finally, the committee will have to order the chair to report the bill to the House. I would like to welcome again representatives from the department who are available to answer technical questions related to the bill. They have all been introduced and are the same departmental experts that were with us from the start of the review of clause by clause. So to begin, let's go back to as we adjourned on the last meeting. We had circulated the language for clarification of the sub-amendment of Madame Sachs to the NDP Amendment 5. Motion 5, the sub-amendment to NDP 5. So that's where we had closed on Friday when the committee adjourned. So we're at the sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs. Is there any discussion? If there's none, I will go to a vote on the sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs. Ms. Ferrari, you have the floor on the sub-amendment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I think I just want to pick up where we left off. I think, the Conservatives have been pretty open that we want to ensure that everybody's included in this bill, that the children are at the forefront of this discussion, the child welfare is at the forefront of this legislation. And the pillars of the C-35 put forth by the Liberals, their pillars that they've put forth were quality, availability, affordability, accessibility, and inclusiveness. So what we saw coming forward from NDP amendment was they asked for a an assessment of the progress being made respecting that system, including information on the quality, availability, affordability, accessibility, and inclusiveness of early learning and childcare programs and services. That was an amendment they'd put forth. And the Liberals put forth a sub-amendment. And their sub-amendment removed two key words, the two key pillar words, availability and accessibility. So we recessed, and it was brought forth to my attention that they would put these words back in because they were caught for not having them in there. And I know, I guess what I'm asking, Mr. Chair, is why were these two words, these key two words around this bill, taken out as a sub-amendment? What was the reasoning to remove two of the pillars when we're looking at this legislation of availability and accessibility, which are the two biggest issues that we see in childcare in the country?
Chair, my recollection at the end of the last meeting that we had is that there was the submission of hearing all members at this table of what needed to be in this clause in the sub-amendment, and at that time I asked for unanimous consent, and I do believe that's where we rest in terms of this discussion. Thank you.
So just for clarification, we're not going to get an answer on why those two words were removed. Through you, Mr. Chair.
The matter's been addressed. It's a matter of debate. Is there further discussion on this sub-amendment that's currently on the floor? Oh, sorry, Ms. Gray. And then Madame Gazan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on this sub-amendment where now the words availability and accessibility have been re-entered into the sub-amendment, yes, we unanimously agreed to add this back in, but I guess the point is for reference here is that we never had justification from the government, from the Liberals, why they had removed two of the pillar words, availability and accessibility, from their sub-amendment. Yes, we know it's back in, and that's what we're voting on here now. But we didn't, during the time of asking for unanimous consent, there's no opportunity for debate. So here we are debating now the sub-amendment. When we have unanimous consent, we can't get into a discussion. So the question now, through you, Mr. Chair, is why were those words removed from the sub-amendment at this 11th hour, as we're almost in one of the last clauses that we're looking at here for this child care bill, why the government at the very end of this stage took out the words availability and accessibility, which were two of the 5 pillars of this legislation. Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you.
The Chair simply recognizes the speakers that want to participate in the debate. It's not for me to answer questions as it relates to how we got there, but anybody is open to participate in the discussion and debate on the sub-amendments currently on the floor. Ms. Gazan and then Ms. Ferrari.
Question, like, I'm hearing that we're still on the sub-amendment. Are we voting on we still haven't voted on the unanimous consent? It's still on the floor? Like, no. I don't remember whether we voted on that. And then are we going for it after that? I just don't think we voted on the unanimous consent. Did we? Okay, yes, we did. That's my fault. We voted on it. Sorry. Okay, thank you. Sorry, my fault.
Ms. Ferrari?
I guess through you, Mr. Chair, I think what I would clarify here is that as the critic to this bill and the emails that I've been given, it is my job to ask. It is my job to ask why this was taken out. And I appreciate if you don't want to answer it. I appreciate but if we don't know that there is another agenda here, which is what Conservatives have been fighting for from day one, that this is not a universal childcare bill. It excludes tons and tons of families. The wait list, the accessibility, the affordability is a huge issue. For those that are in the system, it is benefiting them tremendously. I will not dispute that. Mm-hmm. But as the critic and as the emails I've gotten after watching this committee, these are 2 pillars Availability and accessibility, basically the two biggest issues we see with accessing childcare. And I just, on the record, want to understand why those two words were removed in a sub-amendment put forth by the Liberals.
Ms. Sachs?
Through you, Chair, I will say this, that my job as the parliamentary secretary, moving this legislation through, it is my role to hear all the members of this committee when there are issues where we can agree on and move legislation forward on behalf of families, children, and Canadians. This committee, the will of this committee was to take unanimous consent for the language that is in the bill at this sub-amendment time. And through you, Mr. Chair, I think if we can debate on the as amended under consent, it would be far more productive in moving this legislation along. Thank you.
So we have it on the record. It's fine if that's what you want your answer to be. I was giving you another opportunity to say it. Of course, we put unanimous consent to put these words back in. I was just giving an opportunity for you to explain, because now there is a lack of trust from the public of why these two words were removed, when we've been very vocal that we are trying to represent all Canadians.
Ms. Gray?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on this sub-amendment, which does now have quality, availability, affordability, accessibility, and inclusiveness all back in it, it's just very interesting and telling that the government hasn't been forthcoming to explain why they took out the availability and accessibility part of their sub-amendment. So we know that it's back in, but I think for context, we need to understand moving forward why, as we vote on this sub-amendment, why it was taken out. And we haven't had any rationale from the government. We have the parliamentary secretary here. We haven't had, it's really telling that the government is not wanting to disclose why they took out availability and accessibility initially from this. And we've had silence over there. So it's really concerning, especially considering that we're talking about a government bill. And as we move forward with the implementation of this, as we know the provinces have signed agreements, it's concerning to perhaps know that availability and accessibility in the back of the government's minds aren't really two important pillars that they originally had in the forefront of this. And the government is not willing to make any comment, which I think is saying lots without saying anything. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Seeing no further debate, I will call for a recorded vote on the sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs. Mr. Clerk?
Madame Sachs?
En faveur?
Mr. Collins? Yes. Mr. Coteau? Yes. Mr. Van Bynen?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Could you give a thumbs up or thumbs down, Mr. Long? Okay.
Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Ms. Falk? Yes. Ms. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mr. Caputo?
Yes.
Madame Bérubé?
Oui.
Ms. Gazan?
Yes.
Yes pour 11, nays contre, nil, 0.
Move to the amendment as amended of Ms. Gazan. Seeing no discussion on the amendment of Ms. Gazan, I'll call for a recorded vote on the amendment as amended of Ms. Gazan.
Madame Sachs?
Oui.
Mr. Collins? Yes, again. Mr. Coteau? Yes. Mr. Van Bynen? Yes. And Mr. Long? Okay, yes. Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Ms. Falk?
Yes.
Ms. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mr. Caputo?
Yes.
Yes. Madame Bérubé?
No.
And Ms. Gazan?
Yes.
Yes pour 10, nays contre, 1.
Thank you. Given that NDP 5 was adopted, Bloc Québécois, the number 3 amendment cannot be moved because there's a line conflict. Shall clause, because NDP 5 amendment was adopted.
Yeah.
Then the amendment put forward by the Bloc Québécois as BQ3 cannot be moved because there's a line conflict.
Block 3.
Block 3.
Thank you.
On the same clause 16. Cannot be moved, so cannot be put into debate because there was, once you adopted NDP 5, it nullified that part because of the line conflict. We shall go, shall clause 16 carry as amended? I see unanimous, clause 13 carrying as amended. Clause 13 is carried then as amended. Shall clause 17? Sorry. Yes.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, I believe you said clause 13, but we're on clause 16. So just for the record, I just wanted to make sure you.
Thank you for pointing it out because I was thinking 16. I don't know. I said 17. My fate. Let's go back again. Shall clause 16 carry as amended? See unanimous consent. So clause 16 is carried as amended. Shall clause 17 carry? Clause 17 carried. Was that the last one? Thank you, committee members. That concludes the clause by clause. Now we will go to the preamble. Is there an amendment on the preamble? I believe, Madame Beyroube.
No.
Madame Beyroube,
Oui.
you have an amendment on the preamble?
Oui, c'est ça que j'ai dit. Oui. Donc, le BQ4,
BQ4 that the bill be modified in its preamble by replacing lines 9 on page 1 as follows. In the respect of the provincial jurisdictions in establishing the workforce, this amendment is part of the preamble because it is part of the provincial jurisdiction, whereas family policies and early childhood learning is concerned. I think it's important that it be written this way so that it guides the decisions made based on the bill.
Thank you, Madame Beyroube. Again, I, as chair, must ensure that the orders and rules adopted by the House of Commons are followed, and your amendment is not admissible, and it's not admissible based on the same ruling I made earlier. Madame Beyroube.
Monsieur le Président, je conteste donc.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to challenge your decision.
My ruling has been that it's inadmissible, and Madame Beyroube has challenged my decision. It's not debatable, but it goes immediately to a vote. Mr. Clerk, a recorded vote on the decision of the chair.
Madame Sachs?
Just to clarify, Clerk, I am voting on the sustaining of the chair's decision?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, let me be clear. The vote is on whether the committee accepts the ruling of the chair.
Mr. Collins? Sure. Mr. Coteau? Mr. Van Bynen?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Thumb, can you show your thumb, please? Thank you. Ms. Gray?
No.
Ms. Falk? No. Ms. Ferreri?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, no.
Mr. Caputo?
No.
Madame Bérubé?
Non.
And Ms. Guzan?
Yes.
Yeas pour 6, nays contre 5.
The ruling of the chair has been upheld. We'll now move to, is there an amendment on the preamble from, do we have a second? Yeah, which one is this? My notes here are not accurate.
So it's this.
Madame Bay.
Donc,
BQ5, that the bill in the preamble be modified by adding after line 21, page 1, as follows, that it recognizes the unique expertise of the Government of Quebec where the implementation of educational and childcare services are concerned that are affordable. This having established an innovative system in 1997 as part of a family comprehensive policy for Quebecois families, a better work-life balance or work-study balance, a generous parental leave systems, and services adapted to self-employed individuals. Let me explain myself. This amendment is important to guide the actions and interpretations of this bill. Our amendment clearly indicates in the Act the historic expertise of Quebec as part of its jurisdiction and its family policies. I would invite all of my colleagues to support it.
Thank you, Madame Bérubé. Your motion is inadmissible since it has not been made necessary by a previous amendment to the bill. The amendment seeks to make a substantive modification by adding new elements to the preamble. As House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition states on page 774, in the case of a bill that has been referred to committee after second reading, a substantive amendment to the preamble is admissible only if it is rendered necessary by amendments made to the bill. In addition, an amendment to the preamble is in order when its purpose is to clarify it or to ensure uniformity of the English and French versions. In the opinion of the chair, the proposed amendment is substantive. Therefore, I rule the amendment inadmissible. Do you accept my ruling?
Monsieur le Président, je conteste donc aussi votre décision.
Mr. Chair, I would also challenge your decision on this one.
Mr. Clerk will call a recorded vote on the decision on the ruling of the chair on the inadmissibility of Madame Bérubé's amendment.
Madame Sachs?
Yes, I support the decision of the chair.
Mr. Collins? Mr. Coteau? Mr. Van Bynen? Mr. Long? Thank you. Ms. Gray?
No.
Ms. Falk?
No.
Ferreri?
No.
Mr. Caputo?
No.
Madame Bérubé? Ms. Guzan?
Yes.
Yeas pour 6, nays contre 5.
Therefore, the ruling of the chair has been upheld. We will now move to, I believe, an amendment from Madame Guzan. No? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. The second one. It was Madame Bérubé. Madame Bérubé, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. BQC.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. B6, that this bill in the preamble be modified by adding after line 7 on page 2 as follows, that the Government of Canada recognize that because of the special and unique role of the provincial jurisdiction of the Government of Quebec for childcare services and early learning, and the fact that Quebec developed educative services that are of quality as part of its family policy adopted in 1997, the Government of Quebec does not have to agree to the multilateral framework since it intends to retain sole responsibility for this matter within its boundaries. This amendment, Mr. Chair, is important because it recognizes all the work accomplished by the Government of Quebec since almost the last 25 years where early learning and childcare are concerned. Government of Quebec declined the Government of Canada's invitation to be part of the framework. And the reason is very simple. Quebec is responsible for these services and fully assumes its family policy responsibilities and its childcare framework. And as such, it does not have to report to anyone. And I'd invite once again my colleagues to vote for this amendment and recognize the jurisdiction of Quebec in this matter.
Merci, Madame Bérubé. Your amendment, as identified as Bloc Québécois 6, is inadmissible since it has not been made necessary by a previous amendment to the bill. The amendment seeks to make a substantive modification by adding new elements to the preamble. As again, House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, states on page 774, in the case of a bill that has been referred to committee after second reading, a substantive amendment to the preamble is admissible only if it is rendered necessary by amendments made to the bill. In addition, an amendment to the preamble is in order when its purpose is to clarify it or to ensure uniformity of the English and French versions. In the opinion of the Chair, the proposed amendment is substantive. Therefore, I rule the amendment inadmissible.
Monsieur le Président, je conteste votre décision.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to challenge your decision.
Mr. Clerk, will I call for a recorded vote on the decision of the Chair that the amendment is not admissible?
Madame Sachs?
I sustain the decision of the chair, yes.
Mr. Collins? Mr. Coteau? Mr. Van Bynen? Mr. Long? Yes. Ms. Gray?
Yes?
Ms. Falk?
Yes.
Ms. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mr. Caputo?
Yes.
Madame Bérubé?
Non.
Ms. Gazan?
Yes.
Yeas pour 10, 10, nays contre, 1.
The decision of the Chair has been upheld, so we will now move to NDP 6. Madame Gazan, you have an amendment?
Yes,
preamble.
that the bill C-35 in the preamble be amended by adding after line 29 on page 2 the following. Whereas the Government of Canada is committed to upholding the right of Indigenous peoples to be consulted in order to obtain their free, prior, and informed consent for legislation pertaining to Indigenous children. There's a couple of reasons why this is important. One, the committee approved the amendment contained within the bill, which makes it a necessary change. The other thing is that I know Ms. Redden indicated that it served no purpose. Amending the bill, adding free, prior, and informed consent. If you look at the framework agreement that was signed, there is mention that Indigenous peoples have a right to self-determination over matters impacting their kids. The very definition of self-determination is actually free, prior, and informed consent. So the framework confirms free, prior, and informed consent. I'm merely just stating what's already stated in the framework. And if there was a concern about free, prior, and informed consent, then perhaps they should have looked at that when they were developing the framework in consultation with Indigenous peoples, where they recognize self-determination. Again, being defined as self-determination being the right of Indigenous peoples, free, prior, and informed consent to matters impacting children.
Your amendment is admissible because the amendment to the because of the acceptance of the amendment to the preamble was adopted on Tuesday, April the 25th. So your amendment today to the preamble is consistent with the clause change that was adopted earlier by the committee. So it is admissible, so we'll open the floor for debate. Ms. Sachs, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to acknowledge my colleague. She is a fierce advocate for Indigenous families and children, and I stand with her on today in her statements and the many things that she advocates for. I know you come to this with a fierce love and compassion and a desire to truly push us all towards reconciliation. I would like to clarify that Ms. Redden's comments were about the implementation, not that it is not of any value, is that current, and this will be, I'll keep my comments brief, we are fully committed to these principles. I don't think there's a single member of this committee or in this House that is not. However, I just want to remind all of us that there is a process and a table where UNDRIP is in the framework so that it can be effectively implemented in our legislation, including free, prior, and informed consent, is currently in process. And as servants of the Crown, we want to make sure that Indigenous leadership does not see preemptive legislation or the interpretation of that. So I want to ensure that I'm fully supportive of that we protect all children and Indigenous children. And I thank her for her advocacy and understand the importance of this being in the preamble. However, I just would like to remind all of us the importance of both principle and process. Thank you, Chair.
Ms. Sachs will go to Ms. Ferrari and then Ms. Gazan on the amendment of Ms. Gazan's on the preamble.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Listen, it's hard not to get frustrated in these discussions because it's, yep, no, we care about you, but we don't, is what we hear. You know, I think the Liberals campaigned on nothing about us without us, and yet they're saying, yep, no, we think you're doing a great job, but we're not actually going to do anything about it. And I think as Conservatives, I think what's also frustrating, we supported this amendment, obviously. We believe that Indigenous peoples should absolutely have the choice to decide what happens with their children. They should be consulted just as we feel every parent should have the choice to choose what is best for their children, which is what we've fought tirelessly
Appel au
for.
règlement, Monsieur le Président. Je n'ai pas d'interprétation.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I no longer have interpretation.
Excuse me. We'll suspend for a moment, Madame Beyroube. Can we try to just come back?
Volumes to where we're at, and you know, our commitment to allowing parents, regardless of
Monsieur le Président, la qualité du son est pas bonne.
Her from the floor? Sorry, Ms. Ferrari, we'll have to suspend. There's a sound quality problem from the committee room, so we'll suspend for a few moments while we get it corrected. It's just that there will only be one mic open in the room at a time for the benefit of the translators and interpreters. And that will be the person that is speaking. So the floor was Ms. Ferrari. I believe we spent it. You have the floor.
Okay, I'm touching my mic. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And listen, I think it's just really important. And, I was talking with my colleague. So there's a motion put forward right now in the preamble, and it's saying, whereas the Government of Canada, this is put forward by the NDP, whereas the Government of Canada is committed to upholding the right of Indigenous peoples to be consulted in order to obtain their free, prior, and informed consent for legislation pertaining to Indigenous children. Now, this was also put forth as an amendment, and the Conservatives supported it. And we've heard from the Liberals they're not going to support this preamble suggestion put forward.
My comments were in outlining the procedure and process in relation to this. I did not give any indication of how we would be voting. I would like that corrected for the record, please.
So Ferrari.
Thank you. Well, I hope that they do support it, because I think what I want to have on record here is that we have supported this, and I think it is exactly the thing that we are fighting for in this bill. When we look at C-35 and why we supported this amendment put forth by my NDP colleague, who I respect greatly, and I know how fierce she is for Indigenous rights, Conservatives believe in the rights of parents to choose what is best for their children. And it is a similar conversation we are having. And this bill continues to have winners and losers, because there are parents on wait lists that will never have access to this program. There are, and they're shutting down these small entrepreneur-owned businesses because they can't afford it. There was a woman who wrote to me and...
Point of order, Chair. Entrepreneurs aren't relevant to the language of the preamble.
They certainly should be, Mr. Chair. If entrepreneurs don't matter to the Liberals, I think we have a big problem for women and feminism.
Right. Women-owned business.
The convention is that you keep your comments to the motion that is currently on the floor.
Thank you. My point, my point is that we have been adamant, and the only party, again, saying we want parents to have the freedom to choose. We want all children included in this bill, and that's why we will support this. But again, we've seen the Liberals not support this, and I just want to say, there's a quote that came to me yesterday, and it's on a public forum, and it's the Coalition of Independent Childcare Providers of Ontario, and it says, "Why are so many home childcare providers closing? I just filed my taxes. 56% of incoming funds went directly back into my program. They are closing because they cannot afford to stay open the way that this legislation is written." That's all I have to say, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Ferrari, I believe, Ms. Kazan, you had the floor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And through you, I have, a really great working relationship with my colleague on the FIWO committee. And we all do. Actually, it's a lovely committee. And I think it's important when we're talking about free, prior, and informed consent as it relates to Indigenous people, though, is that you have to go back historically, where it was legislated that we didn't even have rights over our children. That was in law. That was in the Indian Act. And so we're moving from there. And I have to commend colleagues around the table who have taken this position. We didn't even have rights over our children. In fact, when they shipped them off to residential school, if we opposed that, then we would be arrested. So now it's 2023. We saw a motion pass in the House of Commons today. We had families there. We're talking about impacts on families. So touched, shocked that this passed. And I know that when we're talking about, as I said before, no Indigenous parent would argue against this. And I just want to commend my colleagues who are supporting this, to take this brave step, to know that the sky isn't going to fall, and that it's going to be a better day for all families to recognize our rights as parents to make decisions about our kids. So I just want to thank my colleague for her comments and her thoughtfulness and the time that she has spent listening and having hard conversations. And I commend all my colleagues in the House that have had brave, hard conversations with me about some of these matters. It means a lot to me as a human being, but it also means a lot to Indigenous people throughout the country. So I'll accept the will of the committee, but I also want to thank everybody for journeying this discussion with me and all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gazan. Seeing no further discussion, we have before the floor of the committee the amendment of Ms. Gazan. Ms. Sachs?
Request a vote on division.
Madame Sachs?
No.
Mr. Collins? Mr. Coteau? Mr. Van Bynen? Mr. Long? No. Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Ms. Falk? Ms. Ferreri?
Yes.
Mr. Caputo?
Yes.
Madame Bérubé?
Oui.
And Ms. Gazan?
Yes.
Yeas pour 7, nays contre 4.
To the preamble was adopted on division. Shall the preamble carry as amended? Do I see consensus on the preamble carried as amendment? Consensus, the preamble has been carried as amended. Shall the short title carry? Carried on consensus. Shall the title carry? Carried. Shall the bill as amended carry? Carried. Shall the chair report the bill as amended to the House? Carried. Shall the committee order a reprint of the bill as amended for the use of the House at report stage? Agree? Carried. Yeah, I guess we have to do that. Notes. Thank you. That concludes the clause-by-clause debate on Bill C-35. I thank all committee members for their input and discussion, as well as departmental officials for showing up to answer technical questions on the bill. With that, Mr. Clerk and committee, meeting adjourned.